Good evening. This is the February 18, 2025 regular meeting of the Complaint Committee of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force of the City and County of San Francisco. The time is 5:30 p.m. The Sunshine Ordinance Task Force and its committees convene in hybrid meetings that allow for either in-person attendance or remote participation. Public comment will be taken on each item of the agenda. Meeting decorum. Any member of the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force or its committees may call for decorum due to the disorderly conduct of meeting participants. Persons who engage in threatening and/or menacing behavior may be asked to leave. Chair Schmidt, that completes my announcements.
Okay. Yeah, let's go ahead with number one.
Item number 1, call to order, roll call, and agenda changes.
I think we should have, since we have three of us here, I know that I didn't put anything in terms of paperwork in for number 4.
Shall I take roll call?
I think, oh, yeah, I was just thinking about agenda changes. Let's do roll call. Thank you.
Taking roll call. Chair Schmidt.
Present.
Chair Schmidt, present. Vice Chair Stein. Vice Chair Stein, present. Member Sugarman.
Present.
Member Sugarman, present. 3 members present. We have a quorum.
Okay. Let's move number 4 back behind number 6, since those actually are the only 2 substantive matters we have today. And also, just because we're on record, number 25005, when we get to it, that's been dismissed.
It's been withdrawn.
Thank
Yes.
you for the proper language.
Public comment?
Yes.
Anyone in the online community who would like to make public comment on item 1, please raise your hand in the app or press *3 on your telephone. I'll give you a moment. We have no one in the room and no hands raised.
Okay, when you're ready, number 2.
Item number 2, approval of the January 21, 2025 Complaint Committee meeting minutes.
Any edits from the members? Yes, members time.
But maybe I wanted to suggest change in some of the items, because what I had in my notes in the movements that I made were a little more detailed than what's in the minutes on item 6, action, under actions. It's kind of minor, but I just think it's a little more clear, the motion as I believe I made it. So where it starts 67.7D, I had requiring that members of city bodies during public meetings make only minimal clarification or questions during public comment periods. And this is kind of taken closely from the language of the ordinance. And actually, Ms. Peterson, I sent you an email with the wording here just now, so that you would have it. And then 67.14A, the right of persons attending open or public meetings to take video or audio recordings of the proceedings, and 67.15C, applying time limits uniformly to members of the public during comment periods. They're just a little more explanatory of what was in those statutes than the somewhat shortened version in the action item under number 6. And then under number 7, I have Schmidt moves and Stein seconds that we have jurisdictions and public documents, and to move to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force without a recommendation to consider whether there are what am I looking at? Sorry, I'm going forward here to where is the action item in the minutes.
Is it appropriate to read changes into the record and then I will take the written comment that you've read into the record and make those changes?
Say that again. Sorry, I'm looking at that. It's right here.
Could you please read the changes into the record and then I will make the changes from your written?
Right.
comment?
Well, I am just, the only thing I want to change in item 6 is after each of those sections that we mention, the way it's described. And so that's what I just read for item 6. And then for item 7, it's kind of strange because it currently says, refer to the full task force, this is line 3 under action, for consideration of other violations, but we don't, I think what I actually said is to refer it to consider whether there are one or more violations. It's weird that we say other violations and we don't mention anything. So I think just have it the same, but say with the recommendation to consider whether there are one or more violations rather than for consideration of other violations. And that's, I believe, how I made the motion.
All of those are acceptable to me. So with
Are you
those
looking?
with those edits, I move to approve the minutes as finally edited.
And I'll second that.
Is there a second?
I'll second that. Member Stein.
Moved by Chair Schmidt, seconded by Vice Chair Stein to approve the minutes as edited. Public comment?
Public comment.
Anyone in the online audience wishing to make public comment on item 2, please raise your hand in the app or press *3. We have no one in the room and we have no hands raised. Taking the vote. Chair Schmidt.
Aye.
Chair Schmidt, aye. Vice Chair Stein.
Aye.
Vice Chair Stein, aye. Member Sugarman.
Aye.
Member Sugarman, aye. 3 ayes.
Okay, next item.
Item 3, public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on matters that are within the committee's jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda. Members of the online community wishing to make public comment on item 3, please raise your hand in the app or press *3. We have no one in the room and no hands raised.
Okay, for number 4, let's do what we need to do to shift it back until after number 6, and then 5 is withdrawn.
So call item 6.
Yes.
Calling item number 6, file number 25006. Complaint filed by Mark LaCroix against the San Francisco Fire Commission for allegedly violating Administrative Code Sunshine Ordinance Section 67.5 regarding public meetings or a permitted closed session within a public meeting. Section 67.15 by failing to provide the right to an opportunity to address a policy body on items within the policy body's subject matter jurisdiction. And 67.21 by failing to respond to a public request in a timely and/or complete manner. One moment, please. Elevating Ms. Maureen Conifrey, Ms. Kathy Aguas Aklan, and Mark LaCroix to panelist.
Great.
The three parties have been promoted.
All right, so it appears we have all parties for our 25006, our case for today. I'm going to just reiterate that what we do here in committee, we don't make any final decisions, but we want to hear from the parties. You each present to us petitioner first for up to 3 minutes. Tell us about your case, having in mind that we've already been reading the paperwork that is in the file. After the 3 minutes and 3 minutes, we will likely have questions for the parties. And after that questioning, we will deliberate. What we often do here is decide whether the case should go on to the full task force for a determination. We look at issues of jurisdiction. We look at issues of whether or not public documents are involved, or if this involves public meetings that are covered by the Brown Act, the Sunshine Ordinance. And we may move a case to the task force with a recommendation. Sometimes we'll actually put it on a special consent calendar. We try to get a sense of what's going on in the case, and so we will pass along certain information at the task force level about the case as we hear it here today. Okay, so with that in mind, we can hear first, when the timer is ready, from the petitioner.
Mr. LaCroix, are you ready for your 3 minutes to begin?
I am. Can you hear me well?
Yes, thank you. Your time starts now.
Thank you, Patricia. Good evening, Chair Schmidt, Member Stein, Member Sugarman, Mark LaCroix here. Prepared a little statement here, nothing too extensive. Once I became familiar with some of the public meeting laws, I realized that the Fire Commission has been taking actions outside of public meetings. I gathered up 5 documents that were sent to me from the Fire Commission that are stated to be actions of the Fire Commission where no meeting has taken place. These range from simple actions such as denying a records request to responding to the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force on a Fire Commission letterhead. And the big one is denying me an appeal in a matter where the Fire Commission disregarded the charter and denied me some $77,000 in back pay when faulty separation charges were properly dismissed by motion in front of the Fire Commission. The Fire Commission's response before you today would argues that the Fire Commission staff can make these kind of decisions and apparently not even inform the commissioners of their actions. The charter is clear that, quote, any action taken other than a public meeting shall be void, unquote. All 5 documents that I attached to my complaint are actions stated by the Fire Commission that they stated to be taken by the Fire Commission. The Commission contends that they have no records of any communications among the Fire Commission and staff that occurred to inform, deliberate, and take the action in order to issue these 5 documents to me. That's all I got for an opening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And respondents, who will be speaking this evening, please? Hello, Ms. Conifrey. Ms. Conifrey, I think you're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, that's it.
All right, yes. Good evening, committee members and Ms. Peterson. This is Maureen Conifrey, staff for the Fire Commission.
And your 3 minutes begins now.
Good evening, committee members and Ms. Peterson. This is Maureen Conifrey from the Fire Commission. I'm representing the Fire Commission at this meeting, and we submitted a letter, and I wasn't sure if the committee members received that timely, because it was late on Friday evening by the time it went out. Can you confirm? Otherwise, I can read it into the record.
Was that came in timely, right?
Because of the deadline that I gave the Fire Commission, it is not in the packet. The packet was published and they did submit timely, but it was not in time to be included in the packet. So it was provided to you separately, but Ms. Conifrey, if you could read it into the record, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Dear Honorable Task Force members, in response to Mr. LaCroix's complaint dated January 13th, 2025, the Fire Commission responds as follows. Mr. LaCroix's complaint appears to assume that public records requests to the Fire Commission are typically considered by the Fire Commissioners themselves, and that there is a lot of back and forth between the staff and commissioners regarding public records requests. This assumption is inaccurate. The Fire Commission receives numerous public records requests, not just requests from Mr. LaCroix. They are processed by staff and responded to by staff. It is rare for staff to communicate with the Fire Commissioners regarding public records requests, and even rarer for communications to be in writing, except where it would be reasonable for staff to assume that commissioners are in possession of responsive records. The more general assumption seems to be that any decisions made on behalf of the Commission must be made by the body and not by staff. This has never been the law, and if it were, city government would likely grind to a halt, and it would likely be difficult to recruit members of the public to serve as commissioners if they were essentially be asked to serve as full-time city employees. We have again reviewed Mr. LaCroix's request and state that there are no responsive records. Mr. LaCroix's complaint cites numerous provisions that do not bear on the issue at hand. Section 54952.6 Brown Act, California Government Code Section 54952.6, which has a broad definition of action taken by commission. This provision does not address which matters are brought to the commission or commissioners versus are handled by staff. It simply makes clear that the informal decisions agreed to by the body are considered actions of the body. Section 67.5 of the Sunshine Ordinance states a general principle of open government. This provision has nothing to do with
Ms. Conifrey.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can have another minute. Since you had to read your letter in, I'll give you another minute.
Okay, section 67.5 of the Sunshine Ordinance, San Francisco Admin Code, section 67.5, which states a general principle of open government. This provision has nothing to do with the manner in which public records requests to a commission are processed or responded to. Section 67.15 of the Sunshine Ordinance, which recognizes the right of public comment on agenda items at meetings. This provision has nothing to do with the manner in which public records requests to a commission are processed or responded to. There is one provision Mr. LaCroix cites that is relevant, section 67.21B, which addresses compliance with the public records request. As we have explained, however, there has been no violation of that provision. For the reasons stated above, the Fire Commission believes that complaint number 25006 should be dismissed. Respectfully submitted.
Thank you. All right, members, questions for the parties? Go ahead, Member Stein.
I just have a couple questions for the Fire Commission, or Ms. Conifrey. Could you please describe the search process for the responsive records in this request?
What we would do is if a public records request comes in and it's simple and routine. I am or was the custodian of that record. It would be on my computer. It would be in a file in my office. And if it was something non-routine, I would send it to the city attorney's office. What I did on these searches was when the request came in, I searched days following to see if anything went out to the president of the commission, and nothing came up. And I know that's not how I operate. That if there is a record, I would be the one who would know where that record is. And if there was a question on whether it was, potentially a responsive record that had to be withheld or redacted, I would send that to the city attorney's office. The commissioners are retired employees. Well, they're not really employees. They're, as you well know, volunteers. And that's how we run things at the Fire Commission office. When I have to show up to a meeting such as this, we notify the commission so that they know that, we might be away from the office, but that has no bearing on the actual public records request Mr. LaCroix submitted. This is after the fact that we are now appearing at the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force on potential violation.
Okay, and then I was going to ask, but I believe you've already answered this, whether you would just be, authorized to correspond with the requester on your own. I believe you've already answered this in the affirmative. And then my third question is, did you consult with anyone before writing these communications? And if so, who? Was this a case where you consulted with the city attorney's office or no?
On this response for today's hearing?
No, on the response to the petitioner on their records request.
Okay, so I think there was five separate requests from Mr. LaCroix at different times. There was an email regarding, 1, 2, 3, 5 separate requests. And
I thought I had read that there was one request for any emails surrounding the issuance of certain 5 different communications.
I'm sorry, what? So these 5 responses that I provided, I would have asked the city attorney's office for advice on the responses to the Sunshine Task Force.
Oh, so just for the Sunshine Task Force then, but not for the responses to...
If they were simple and routine, no.
Okay. And you already said you did not consult with any of the fire commissioners.
That is correct.
Okay, those were all my questions.
Okay, I'm going to continue with the respondent. This is Chair Schmidt. So just could I ask, just for a little more detail, it sounds like you personally had involvement in the request that is involved in a few of these 5 documents. Are you the person there who would respond, who would do all the communications, et cetera, and the locating of the documents when a records request comes in?
Yes. Well, so I came back as after I retired, came back immediately as a Prop F employee. So Kathy is now the commission secretary.
Okay.
But
Okay.
this all started while I was the commission secretary.
Okay. So you were the commission secretary, and it sounds like when a records request would come in asking for commission records or for commission records,
I would be the custodian.
you would communicate any communications with the requester, and then if it became a task force member matter, any communications with the task force, you would handle those, but you wouldn't raise it to the level of the commissioners having to sort of review it and make a decision about it. Is
No.
that accurate?
That is very accurate.
Okay, thank you. I want to jump to something a little different, which is the third of the five is Mr. LaCroix refers to a letter denying his request for 1/12/22 closed session. I'm going to just ask you if either if you have knowledge yourself or if you know sort of like how the process would work. If Mr. LaCroix makes that kind of request to obtain something, how is that request handled? Who does it? Who talks to who, et cetera?
Okay, well, that request actually has already been adjudicated and violations found in front of the task force. So
Okay.
you should be very well versed on this January 12th, 2022 closed session audio tape.
Okay, so that's when he's asking for the document and the fire commission is denying that request, and that's the matter that went through the task force process.
That is correct.
Okay.
About 5 times.
Now but the decision to deny, which I understand, we have a disagreement on, but to deny, is that a decision that was made? It was made, well, I know the fire commission made a decision about that transcript, but somebody made a decision to tell Mr. LaCroix that Mr. LaCroix was not entitled to receive that, what he asked for. Who makes that decision?
Okay, so the first time he had requested it, I sent it off to the city attorney's office. And since they were the ones that actually had us agendize that matter in closed session, that was the 5C that didn't have a very good description on it. So that went to the city attorney's office and they helped me draft that denial. And then when it went to the task force and it was recommended that the fire commission once again release that tape, we took it back to the commission for another vote. I believe that was in December. And they voted once again not to disclose it. The city attorney was in there advising them why it should not be disclosed. And we came back and I let Ms. Peterson know what the vote was, that it was unanimous not to turn that audio tape over to Mr. LaCroix. And it was once again scheduled for a hearing in January where a new violation was ordered that the commission, it was ordered that they turn it over. And we haven't received any order of determination on that yet.
Got it. Okay, so the second time that this came up, it was placed before the commissioners. Was that at a meeting?
Correct. That was at a regular meeting in December.
Okay, so that was to respond when the task force disagreed, essentially, and to respond. And so that went before the commissioners at a meeting. What
That
my
was put on an agenda, correct?
Okay, but my question is, and I understand it could be done in a lot of different ways, but going back in time, I know that you said that there was consultation with the city attorney about the request to disclose the closed session. But in that discussion, somebody's a decision maker. Is that you who would have been making the final decision on what to tell Mr. LaCroix initially?
For which one are you talking about?
The first time around, when he makes the initial.
You mean on the 11/30/2023?
What I'm the fire commission to letter to LaCroix denying his request for the 11/30/2023.
Right, that was my, after consulting with the city attorney's office,
Okay.
that was my letter to Mr. LaCroix.
Now, was anyone else other than you, with city attorney's advice, was anyone else involved in making that decision?
No,
Okay, so that's a decision. Would it feel fair to you to then characterize that as being your decision based on city attorney advice?
yes.
Okay, thank you. That gets me to where I wanted to be on that question. Okay, I want to move now to the fifth of the category items of Mr. LaCroix, letter reappeal and providing resumes. This, I believe, Mr. LaCroix said that he wanted to file an appeal, and there was a response to that. I believe that the response was a denial. Could you tell me about that process, how that transpired?
The same way. It came in, it went to the city attorney's office. They were the ones that actually were the department. I believe it was the department city attorney was working with different members who were separated they put together a special appeals rules where there was 5 arbitrators to pick from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that was authored by the city attorney's office and signed by me and sent to Mr. LaCroix.
Okay. And so there was a decision. So was the response essentially and I know this is in the file, it's just skipping my mind at the moment, but the response to LaCroix was, you need to go through this process, the picking the arbitrator process. Is that essentially what the response was?
Well, I'd have to actually read the response. Assuming that it had to do with the new appeals rules, yes.
Okay, I'm going to switch to the petitioner here on this specific subject, which is your request, the fifth of the 5 requests. You asked you wanted to appeal the decision, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I'd actually filed a formal appeal with the fire commission.
Okay, so you filed a formal appeal with the fire commission and you received an answer, correct?
Yes, in that fifth letter.
Okay, and what was their answer to you in substance?
Well, I've got it right in front of me. So the part that pertains to that particular appeal, it says, this will also advise you that your request for a separate hearing to address your concerns that you should have received back pay for a portion of your employment is denied. And at the bottom of the letter, it's signed, very truly yours, Fire Commission, and there's //S// Marine Conifere
Okay,
Commission Secretary.
so this is, what happened with the specific process whereby several of you were told you needed to basically select an arbitrator to go to arbitration? Were you involved in that?
Yes, I was.
Okay, but that was not something that we're really talking about right now, right? That
Right.
process.
They denied one appeal, and they said
Okay.
you can select an arbitrator for your separation. appeal.
Okay, and so your appeal that we're talking about here is essentially about your back pay.
Correct.
Okay, now I'm going to move back to the respondent. That issue, I take it that you brought it to the city attorney where Mr. LaCroix asks to appeal because he thinks he's entitled to back pay. And then there's a decision to deny the appeal on the back pay. Was that your decision?
At the request of the city attorney's office.
Okay. So there's nobody in the commission structure other than yourself who made the decision to send that letter, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And so it wasn't put before the commission as the commission meeting as a commission, correct?
No, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. And on the documents, Ms. Conifere, it sounds like you processed the document request that's involved here, which is documents associated with these 5 documents. And what you found was that there were simply no responsive documents that existed, and so there's nothing to produce. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Okay. I have no further questions for the witnesses. Anyone?
I still don't.
Okay. Now we're going to deliberate and figure out what we may want to tell the full task force about this matter. Any thoughts?
I'm just going to say it that I'm still trying to suss this one out and I'm waiting for someone else to express their opinion first
Fair
to kind of give it like a linear, this is why I haven't had any questions. I'm a little bit.
And I'll just say, I feel like I don't really know much about the separation process and what role the fire commission is as a commission is supposed to play in doing something like reviewing an appeal. If they have no role in reviewing an appeal, I don't know if it's written anywhere, something that would say what their role would be in that case, or whether it's just up to the fire commission secretary to make those decisions. Like, I don't know if it was like the proper process or not, but as a records request, it's conceivable to me, exactly what the secretary said, what Ms. Conifere said, that nobody else was consulted in the issuing of these documents, and that therefore there wouldn't be responsive documents. Like, that is very conceivable to me. I don't know if that's following like the procedures that you are supposed to follow at the fire commission for making decisions, but it does appear to be what happened here. And there's nothing in the documents themselves that suggests to me that there was another process.
Yeah, I'm on board with a lot of that.
It just sounds like they're saying like, well, it wasn't our decision, right? Like it was someone else's decision. And I guess that was the part that I didn't want to like chime in on because I'm still thinking about it. Where it's like, aren't there other people always consulted about something like that?
Well, the city attorney's office was consulted
Yeah,
in
and
this
they're-
case, and that technically, I mean, I view that as advice.
Yeah.
And then somebody decides whether to accept that advice or not, and Ms. Conifrey decided to accept that advice. And then,
That's not how it was conveyed to me and the way I heard that. Like it was the same thing where it's like, I mean, when I heard that, that's what I went through. I mean, the city attorney's office, especially for commission, like for this sort of body, is consulted per many, many matters. And a lot of times that's what they say, but they don't put it in the way where it was the city attorney's decision. They say on the advice of the city attorney, we spoke to our counselors and we've denied your request, sort of thing. So that's the part where like, because then I was listening to all of your questions about, well, who was in charge of this and who was in charge of that. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, we always have a representative who's coming toward us, who's part of a system, who's in charge of it. And I guess the only thing that I have to add, because I'm still in the weeds of it, is that her name was on a lot of those letters for this. I mean, that kind of, to me, suggests a bit of an ownership in terms of the denials to things.
well, Ms. Conifrey's name is on it, and the fire commission, it says fire commission as if this is a letter from the fire commission, but I think what she's saying is in the fire commission, she's authorized to respond to requests and, well, I guess these are the letters, right? Not just the requests. Like she's responding to the decision to appeal or the request to appeal, signing it as a fire commission and as herself. Like both names are there.
All right, I'll take a stab here.
I apologize.
I think that I agree that the document request itself, 21, it is conceivable that there simply would be no documents that are in existence or were in existence that would sort of be back up to these documents. So I don't really, I think that it's credible, the idea that yeah, they did a search and they found nothing. I think the one thing, I guess the two more difficult issues for me, and I was asking about the two decisions that Ms. Conifrey made on the closed session information and let's see, where is it? Well, numbers 3 and 5. The appeal, the closed session and the appeal. I don't know if those are things that we as a task force have, that's even our business. And I don't know if those are sunshine issues or brown issues, but I don't know. And I think that I'm really hesitant to be telling the fire commission how to make decisions and, who needs to be in contact with the city attorney and what do you actually have to decide as a commission, because I don't know if that's what we do here. But I'm not sure because 6715 and maybe some other provisions of the meeting laws, it feels to me a little bit of a stretch that these items would not have gone before the commission, that this would not be something that Ms. Confrey would need to get approved. It's probably a pretty easy process to get it approved, but they are arguably actions. But again, I don't know if we can do anything about it. My thought is that I certainly don't see a basis for us recommending an order under 6721. I don't know if we recommend it one way or another to the task force. I'm not sure if I see anything under 67.5, but I think that we should ask the task force to look at this to decide if we have any jurisdiction. And if we do, a very intertwined question with that is, was it proper for the two decisions on the appeal and the obtaining of the closed session information, were those properly made not at a commission meeting? So that's my set of my discombobulated set of ideas on this.
I can support the 6721 claim, and it seems like because it's layered with these other items that are that we would want further consideration, that you might just send it to the task force without it like going to consent at all. You just say, we send it to the task force with the recommendation about 6721.
Do you mean 6715?
No, I meant 6721. From what Chair Schmidt said about how maybe there were no responsive documents. That part, that's the part that I was thinking about this entire time, was like, what does this have to do with necessarily like that part of it? Like what we're typically looking for a document to like potentially produce versus like the authority of a document to potentially produce. So like I said, I think that you could send that to the full board with a recommendation that they evaluate the claims, and also that we don't believe there's merit to the 6721 claim. That's not like my formal, way I would put it, but that's what I would say.
I might also say that we ask them, well, as you mentioned, to think specifically about whether there is any implication of 67.15 here. But I think it's it feels very nebulous to me. I guess I respect that you have some doubt about what to do with it. And for that reason, I'm happy to send it to the full task force. But it seems like the claims are just very tenuous here. And I kind of agree that it's not exactly our business to just, I don't think it is in our jurisdiction to say how different commissions, what needs to be processed by the entire commission and what needs to be processed by the administrative staff of that commission. But there maybe is just a twinge of doubt about whether decisions of this gravity would be something that's that there should be an ability to have some kind of public testimony around, or some kind of public light around. I don't know.
Can I ask something that's, I apologize if this has already come up in the course of this discussion, but haven't we discussed in more than one case previously, like a sunshine provision about someone who's designated for this sort of, like someone in every body that they're designated to process these requests?
Sure. Yeah. And it sounds like they've got that all kind of figured out. They don't have some bodies. It's like you don't know who's in charge of public records requests. Mm-hmm. It seems to me that that's not a question here.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion that we find that these are public meetings and records are involved here, that there is one jurisdiction question that we want to have considered by the full task force. Because there's potential jurisdiction on two specific items that we recommend that the task force find no violation of 67.21B, but consider the other claims, comma, whether the task force has jurisdiction, comma, associated with the decision-making process that was done administratively on the closed session denial and the back pay appeal denial.
Do we maybe want to be more specific and say around 61 or 67.15 rather than the other, just saying the other, because 67.5 doesn't seem, I don't know, it doesn't seem as applicable here to me since there was no meeting where it was discussed. But we don't have to, but I just to focus it even more if you feel like it can.
I will add at the end, comma, primarily in reference to 67.15. That's all. That's the text. Just to explain, I want to take another look at this, and I think other people would want to look at it too, but I'm not 100% convinced that we're maybe not looking at another provision of either state or local law on this. And I'm glad that Mr. LaCroix pointed out these, and I'm intrigued by this. Ultimately, I don't know what we're going to think is the answer, but that is, I think we start with 6715. Maybe it becomes another provision, or else we might just say, this is none of our business. We can't criticize this because it's just not a task force matter. So the motion, I think, maybe we should read what I said and edit it before we see if there's a second.
Yes, I'd like some assistance with culling the language. Moved by Chair Schmidt to find that these are public meetings and records, that there is one jurisdiction question considered by the full task force because there is potential jurisdiction on two specific items, that we recommend that the task force find no violation of 6721B, but consider the other claims, whether the task force has jurisdiction associated with the decision-making process that was done administratively on the closed session denial and the back pay appeal denial, comma, primarily in reference to 67.15.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
I wonder if you want to say after you mentioned the closed session denial and back pay appeal denial, maybe it's just in parentheses, documents number 3 and 5.
Sure.
In the request, just to, hone people in on it.
Yeah, exactly. So that in parens would be after the two.
At the end, after administratively on closed session denial and back pay appeal denial.
Parentheses, document items 3 and 5 in the request.
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah. Okay, I think then we can figure out if anyone wants to second my motion.
I'll second it.
Hey, there we go.
Moved by Chair Schmidt, seconded by Member Sugarman. Public comment?
Yes.
Anyone wishing to make public comment on item 6, please raise your hand in the app or press *3. We currently have 2 hands raised.
All right.
Taking the first caller. Caller, you've been unmuted. How many minutes?
Hi.
Just a
3
moment.
minutes. 3 minutes.
1 moment.
Hi,
Your
hello.
3 minutes
Hi,
begins
good evening.
now.
Good evening. I just wanted to point out that, part of this is the strangeness of it all is that the city attorney's making decisions, but they're pretending they're coming from the fire commission. So when the city attorney can theoretically deny somebody an appeal, why is this being used as a it's being presented as if it was a decision made by the fire commission, and it's actually a decision that's being made by the city attorney. And so why isn't the city attorney just directly telling Mr. LaCroix it's denied? So I'm just saying there's something funny about this. And he has the right to an appeal. The law is pretty clear about it, and I think who owns this decision is very important. And it doesn't make sense if Ms. Conifrey's even involved if it's really the city attorney is denying him his right to appeal. That's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello,
Good evening,
caller.
Task Force.
Hello, you've been unmuted. Are you ready for your 3 minutes?
Yes, ma'am.
They start now.
Good evening, Task Force members. First of all, I'd like to point out that they're under the Fire Commission Secretary's job description. There is no wording about making decisions. In fact, it is the Fire Commission Secretary's duty to inform the Commission on these matters, and they're supposed to rule on. So I realize that you're all at a disadvantage here because I'm one of 16 firefighters who was terminated horribly illegally. They violated every city charter protection, every protection of the Firefighter Bill of Rights. There was collusion and conspiracy with the city attorney's office and the Fire Commission. In fact, the atrocities that were committed against us under the guise of public health and safety for this whole vaccine mandate, they just went Wild West on us. And because they claimed it was a law, which was never passed as a law, they claimed it was an emergency, and they therefore gave themselves carte blanche to do whatever they wanted, no matter how illegal and how much it violated our rights. I realize you all don't know how deep and dark this goes, but this was the most atrocious violation of state, federal, and Firefighter Bill of Rights laws that has ever been conducted. And everybody's playing CYA here, and they're duping you thinking, oh, this is all legit. This is just this is just formality. This complaint has no merit. We're not going to turn it. They have no intention of obeying you. They didn't obey any of the laws or protections that we possess. In fact, in reality, they didn't even have the power, the final say to fire us. We're technically not fired. and they're pretending that we are. So Mr. LaCroix is very intelligent and he knows the law very well. And I know you're at a disadvantage, but you're being duped. This is the same song and dance. They constructed and colluded to deprive us of our rights and terminate us illegally. The whole thing was done so badly. When we get to court, this is all going to be
30 seconds.
straightened out. But you're assisting them in colluding and conspiracy if you don't rule with Mr. LaCroix. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, further public comment. Is there anyone else?
We have another hand raised. Hello, caller. You've been
Hello.
unmuted. Hello. Are you ready for your 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, they begin now.
Okay. Just a quick comment. I'm just listening in tonight, and without knowing fully the story of what's going on here, from what I'm gathering, it sounds like the city attorney is denying release to the public of public documents. And if that's the case, that's highly concerning because the whole point of this is to have transparency. So I think that you guys should really do due diligence in looking into this and making sure that that's not the case, because that's not the way it's supposed to be. Thank you for your work on this.
Thank you. So if there's no other public comment, members, anything before we vote? Okay, let's go ahead with that.
Taking the vote on item 6, Chair Schmidt.
Aye.
Chair Schmidt, aye. Member Sugarman.
Aye.
Member Sugarman, aye. Vice Chair Stein.
Aye.
Vice Chair Stein, aye. 3 ayes.
Okay. Thank you to the parties. So that's the end of that matter for today.
Thank you. Item 4.
4.
Item 4, hearing on Complaint Committee Administration. Discuss role in advancing expansion of Sunshine Ordinance Task Force role per Administrative Code Sunshine Ordinance, Section 67.30 authorizations.
Okay, this is something we've had on our calendar for a while. I want to only really use it when we have all 3 members here. I don't have specific material here today. What I want to be very sort of like flexible, open about what we talk about, what we consider here, because I think the members have some good ideas. And I think that what I'm sort of trying to have us do is brainstorm. This is a very smart group, and I think to try to brainstorm to get some somewhat finite ideas about things that would be effective, that would be viable. Some things they maybe just we try it, it doesn't work. But I think that it's easy to come up with ideas. I think all 10 members of the task force have great ideas on things. It's easy to come up with ideas and ask someone else to implement them. What I'm hoping is that we come up with ideas, that we find some ideas that all 3 of us can sort of like come to a consensus on something finite to present to the task force. And that I would challenge everyone here to maybe come up with one or two things as sort of like a maybe a germ of an idea. And the one thing that I've thought of, and this will be the last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop for the time being. But one thing I've thought of is that I myself had a conversation with a reporter in the city, and that reporter is aware of the task force's work. And it seemed to me that we had a very good conversation about a missed opportunity, which is that we could have a way to communicate better with the press as it's constituted right now. And that's a sort of not as much an idea, but as a germ of an idea. And since we have reporters available, maybe that germ of an idea could be turned into something more usable, more finite. That's sort of my first idea, and I'm trying to come up with a second idea. And I'm just going to go with like one or two myself. I'm not going to try to think of 5 or 6. I'm just going to try to think of 1 or 2 to develop. And that's sort of my idea of how I want to go forth with this. That's my own sort of mental process. But I want to open it up to the other members also.
So it's interesting that you brought that one up, not only because I've been a reporter for a while, but I also had something similar to say about that. Like, not the same idea, but it was in the same like family. I would say, actually something else about communication that I heard when I was first joining the task force. But what I would say about communication with reporters, I haven't had a lot of experience with it in terms of with the Sunshine Task Force, except I would say I can identify specifically 2 notable instances. One of them happened at the very beginning of my appointment when a reporter in a certain publication found my application and published the details of it on my appointment. And I didn't know, I mean, how long do we have to talk? It is a Public Records Commission, so I could have like gleaned that, but of course, in my infinite wisdom, did not think that specific application would be a public document. And so I had put something on there that was quite personal because I thought it was relevant to the application, and they published it. It was like, so that's one instance. Relatedly, there was the story about not the story, but the issue about our former mayor and the text messages and whatnot. There was one story I remember that came up that kind of quoted all of us, and I also see that, you know, in other instances where there are people who are listening that we don't know, and that like and that are, or either in the, you know, audience, but quite often online, or they maybe find the recording and they quote us. And in that way, in both of those instances, what's interesting to me as a reporter is that the information that these people need, that they want, it's already available to them, and they use it the way that they want to. And I can tell you that as a reporter, if that weren't the case and they were looking for some other elucidation, they would find it, you know. And I'm not really necessarily sure in a communication aspect that they are lacking that from us. Like, if like there's probably a contact person on the website, all of our names are listed. And, you know, like if they are looking for me, for example, for me or for looking for a member, they could probably easily find and know that me and Member LaHood in particular would have quite readily available contact information because of the nature of our jobs. And if not, Member Kumar as well. And I would, so I guess at least in terms of what your suggestion is, because I have my own, not quite the same thing, but like what do you see, given what I just said, what do you see as like lacking in terms of communication with the media?
Well, it's not as much that we're opaque or that people can't get access to what's going on here. I think that, well, I'll use that example of the mayor and the texts. I felt like that is a reportable issue. That's a story, and I'm glad they got it. I think that there have been, in the few years I've been doing this, there have been a few others, and I'm not saying that we get big, you know, reportable stories that have widespread application that often. But I think that there are times when we will have something that is sort of like politically important, and it doesn't get reported. It doesn't. Nobody either sees it or they determine that it's not worth looking at. And I guess I think that I know that if I look at a lot of the decisions that we make here, a lot of decisions, they really don't have much impact on anything. Somebody gets their, you know, a document that they were looking for. We push on someone to move faster on something, you know, but they're not really cases that have any significance in terms of like, wow, that's say a big gap in the law, or it's my personal thought that the issue right now that I'm so interested in is destruction of records. And I think that the destruction of records story is probably about 10 times as much as any other issue that we deal with in terms of quantity. I think that there's a lot of records that maybe are being destroyed before they even get into the file. And that's, I think, got to be a story that someone's got to be looking at. And so I guess it's like, can we sort of like do a shout out sometimes? It's almost like 3 times a year, a press release on some significant issue that we've encountered. And I know it goes into our annual report, and maybe that's simply the best way we can do it. But that's just sort of my thinking.
Okay, so that is interesting. I think that like I can come at it from 2 angles. I can tell you immediately right now, or at some point, 5 different ways for you to gain visibility on many stories that you want to gain visibility on. Just in the sense of like, just putting out some random names of publications we know. Would you necessarily expect the Chronicle or the Examiner to pick up a story? Not necessarily, but generally speaking, there are all sorts of publications that are following all sorts of things, including ones that obviously do follow the Sunshine Force, but also even in a more like slightly mainstream way that would be interested in that information. I believe even, if we're just speaking contextually from what I remember, the story that we were talking about was in Mission Local. There are any number of ways to do that, including one that I was going to get to about outreach. So like that, one of the easier things to do aside from press releases is simply, and I've recommended this to many of the people I speak to, is simply to form connections with journalists to the best. This is the part where I'm also a little bit conflicted, which I'll get to, but to the best of your ability to make sure that you have a clear mission statement, that it's literally about wanting to connect so that they're aware of what's going on more closely in the Sunshine Force, like in terms of specific cases and specific outcomes. That's kind of how I would phrase it versus what you said. And I don't really know, it just kind of makes me feel a little, it's not wrong. I understand exactly where you're coming from. But like for me on the board, I kind of don't want to be seen to be playing favorites for certain cases. So it's more like how do we make sure that these people are even kind of tuned into this area that we're passionate about. I certainly don't think I think that generally annual reports are not things that are, because they're long, they're not necessarily well reviewed by reporters in that way. But in terms of any of those pieces, I'm certainly happy to, at the very least, advise in terms of not only who you might speak to, but also how to write a press release around it. And honestly, for a lot of editors, and this is just not even my experience, this is my experience writing press releases, because for me as an editor, I ignore a lot of stuff. But as someone who's written press releases, kind of where to send them and who's looking for that. And a lot of those places, they have such a need for content on a day-to-day that like they'll just take it and they'll be like, well, it doesn't even, it's not, a very high bar for that.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's kind of like my overhead view. The other thing that comes to mind, which I know we discussed, which I don't really recommend, but I'm just going to put it out there as something that was part of this dialogue at some point, was like having a Twitter account. But but to piggyback off that, because that sounds not like a good idea, unless it was something that was the closest it could get to automation, where like it was a decision that was published, like a judicial decision, like we had an actual decision that we could just literally just have it almost automated as a tweet, not like any other social media like participation was required in that. But I would say that while I don't necessarily think for many reasons that it should be Twitter, but also just like maybe just the idea of that, like just like not Twitter, but like the concept of having something that is a regularly updated set of decisions that is publicly available or sent to certain people or available in a place that is more publicly exposed.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, to me, I work for a kind of like really fun magazine. So it's like you can make it, like in my mind, you're like make it on Instagram or something, for Instagram stories or whatnot. But that's my personal thing. So that's my second thought.
Okay.
I want to add my own this is separately, but also still in the same bucket. And not in response to you, but just what I was thinking about, because everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people do come in with their own participation. I'm very in awe and respect of the amount of time and energy and attention to detail that everyone on this board, and in particular, present members, put into, the documents and into the decisions in the review. It's not something that I personally have a bandwidth for. However, I have been for maybe about 2 or 3 months, and not really significantly, but when this comes up, I think about it. I mean, this is also true for Member LaHood, but as the editor-in-chief of a publication, there's nothing really stopping me from writing a personal essay, if not assigning someone a personal essay, if not publishing an editorial, a submission from the board, that essentially, you know, the funny thing is, when I came into this role, it was into a seat that was vacant by someone who published an essay in the Chronicle. And it wasn't very kind. And I was just like, and I mean, at the time that I came in, you know, I mean, it's just, anyway, it's a longer historical story, but like I am, you know, I've grown into my role from what was a part-time freelance thing to now the full-time editor of this publication. And there's no reason why we can't use that influence, big or small, to at least, if you want something put out there, that's the contribution that I have to give. The only thing I want to add before I hear about it is that I feel like I almost did it. I almost went out and just did that, you know, because I don't have anything bad to say. It's just that there are some people, some of our petitioners and, you know, respondents, people that are so passionate about this board, like this is a very small cohort, that I didn't want to be put necessarily in the spotlight by putting my name on this essay. Like, even if it was something nice to say, where like I would have to somehow both witness a response written about it online, but then also just to be sitting in the meeting and have people calling in and being like, well, we know what member Sugarman thinks about, you know, like XYZ, you know? And so it's just, I have like kind of refrained for that reason, but there's nothing, I don't know. It's only so much of a refrain. It's just, there's nothing like, it's more like how to phrase things in a way that's both, as it is in any part of my job, make it interesting, informative, but also not in a way that can be misconstrued and exploited, just like, you know, like taken the wrong way intentionally. Or I don't know. It's just something I'm kind of like on the fence about, but someone else could write it.
Yeah, so I think I was the person who once upon a time suggested that Twitter idea.
Yeah.
And then was told like, then you do it kind
Yeah.
of thing. But I kind of tend to see it more like, I think how you're like what you see the value of it being, which is that there are certain cases where you're like, you know, what's happening here is sort of a newsworthy phenomenon. And sometimes I've told petitioners, like, I hope you take this to the media, right? Because I think this is an important issue, and the fact that you're not getting your documents or they don't exist or whatever it is potentially noteworthy. So I kind of often hope the petitioners do it. But one thing I was thinking of, because I know this also came up in the context of member Wolf thinking that we had some kind of mailing list for people who wanted to be informed about things that were going on. We don't, apparently, although it's like mentioned somewhere in our procedures or, you know, whatever. So we could have something like an RSS feed where we would, you know, every month or something say, here are notable cases that we had and what we decided. And it would be like a Twitter-like kind of 2 sentences on the notable cases, and it could go directly to anybody who was interested in getting that.
I just want to add one thing to that, because I want to, if you have more to say, I want to hear it. I'm just going to say that the mailing list sounds like the lowest best lift, like the entry point, like the fact that we don't have one. You could literally just announce it, and like you could also email. You can't like opt everyone in, but you could email the people who are prolific participants and say, we have started one. Do you want to be on this? And like even if, see, that's different than Twitter, because it's behind, it's within our systems. It's not public facing. So even if we just started it and then decided later what to do with it.
Yeah, and I also like it kind of better than the idea of Twitter in a way, because at this point, people see email, but see email more when they see their social media than a random posting on a social media feed, especially if we're not posting very often. They may never see it. So, you know, a text list would be even better, but I know that.
And I also think that because it's an email list that that there won't be, because you remember how we have all those discussions about putting things on Google Docs and like the implications. So if it's an email list, it's unbiased. Like it's literally just a list of emails. It's not like something that exists on a platform that we have to like weigh in on.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to just be journalists. Like anybody could get it who wanted it. But our ideal would be to let all the journalists know that it's there. And if you want this kind of release of, you know, a couple sentences on what we thought was notable, not necessarily every case, but ones we really wanted to highlight. And give them, contact information, like who you can speak to further if you want to, look into this.
I think that's a really good idea. And I can also, like, again, in my editorial capacity, have places to promote that, to encourage sign up.
Okay. Excellent. I think that it's my sort of perception that this is one of the opportunity lost areas where there could be something more to this than what's being done. I think that the better our decisions are, the more, and this is partly on, the lawyers to get the law right, et cetera, but the better our decisions are, I think the more authoritative they are. And the only way we can make them more authoritative is by proving it. We don't have court power. But I do think that some of our decisions have a lot of potential impact, and some of them really, I think the texts issue to me was just thinking about the ramifications of the idea of, oh yeah, I just delete, all my messages.
It was a good story.
I can't imagine that, and yet that's what is going on, and people out in the public, kind of in San Francisco, especially people who know there's a sunshine ordinance, they think that, oh yeah, all those documents are available, I should be able to get them. Well, actually, a lot of things are actually not. They're not. They should be, but you'd never get them anyway because people are just getting rid of, what could be critical communications. On the press, I really like the ideas that, see, you guys are talking about stuff that I feel is outside of my knowledge area, and so that's why I'm sort of like trying to like put it out there, because I don't even know what an RSS feed is, if you can imagine that.
Anymore, but
No, it's kind of like one of those OG internet things. It still exists. In fact, we're about to like change our web hosts, and we're talking about using the RSS feed to do it, because it's kind of the undercurrent on a lot of platforms.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that it is something that's widely not discussed, or like that people are really, it's just not, it's like going to a chat room, not really a thing anymore either, in terms of just things that we don't do anymore. But I still think that absent an RSS, I think that it actually makes sense to do an RSS feed, but I think that absent that, just literally we're going to have a mailing list. It doesn't even, we're not even going to send anything on it. We're like, do you want to join our mailing list? I think it's just a really great place to start with that.
And I'll just also throw in there that this seems like something that if we were going to encourage committees to take on specific types of things that would happen regularly, this seems like something for maybe education and outreach and training committee, right? They're just doing outreach about what we've looked at every month that's particularly important.
Yeah, that the language would definitely implicate that committee. That, technically, I may be talking about something that's supposed to be part of another committee's discussion. I'm not that bothered by that in this context, but yeah, they ought to be, frankly, they ought to be educating, and they ought to be doing outreach, and we, as a full task force, maybe we should be assigning them education and outreach obligations for their committee, because I know that they do cases, but that's really our committee. And I'm not trying to take cases away from them. I'd rather they do the cases than me. Yeah. But yeah,
Complaints and outreach committee.
yeah, yeah. And so yeah, excellent. That's a discussion where I feel like we got to something more specific in terms of the ideas. And I think we need to have something like that, and we don't.
Well, I really did like, honestly, when we were up for reappointment, talking about like when this came up before, when you talked about like when you brought the item up about what can we improve, and then being able to talk about what we tried to improve the last time, it just feels very natural for policy bodies to want to like to do that, to iterate forward.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was, I think it's good to, I mean, I don't think that we should do something to kind of add more layers that we don't need, but also like, I think that there's still a lot that we can do to be both more efficient or more public. So, do you want to say, I have one more. Okay. I have one thing in terms of suggestions. This is a little bit, it's sort of related. One thing that, because I was like, what do I want to suggest? One thing I thought was interesting when I was appointed, and I'm just saying this as a matter of like public record because it was during my appointment hearing. Supervisor Dorsey had said something like, and I can't quote directly because I don't remember quite the wording, although it actually also made it into the story, so I could always just Google it right now. But it had to do with how the Sunshine Force and other departments were not good at like communicating with each other. Mm-hmm. And that, maybe I could help with that, which I don't, I was like, sure, yeah, absolutely. Like, I don't know. I didn't really know what he meant. And I still haven't asked him. And so of course that's probably the next, stop if I wanted to know. However, in my time on the force and like both within the hearings and talking to people that work within City Hall and that work, around sunshine issues, I think that maybe what he meant, if I'm just interpreting and guessing, it has to do with a lot of times, like, for example, the clerk in like the mayor's office, for example. So they get hit with a sunshine request, and then after not fulfilling it in the way that is satisfactory to the requester, they get hit with a complaint. And I feel like that comes up a lot. I've heard that a lot, both here and elsewhere, that it's like, well, we didn't know, and like, and everyone, and in those conversations, almost universally, like, well, the Sunshine Force has been like a pain in my side because it's like, we didn't know we had to do that. Now we have to appear for it. And now we have to like have our wrist slapped. And I feel like I'm guessing that's kind of what he meant, is that these people aren't necessarily, they feel like they're caught off guard with sunshine law. And like with the fact that like this is like something that might come across their table. And to me, it's kind of a nebulous area to like consider that. Like, I don't even know if that's what Dorsey meant, but let's assuming it is it for this conversation, because it seems to me like sunshine law seems to come up across the departments, and so they should know. Mm-hmm. But I can kind of see it just as easily where it's like, because we do see so many people come in like, well, we thought we were doing the best we could, but obviously we weren't. So it's one of those areas where, to me, we can't say, well, we can put out more documentation, et cetera. I mean, you could, but I don't feel like that's necessarily it. I feel like it's more like, in terms of, again, with education and outreach, where it's like maybe there needs to be some sort of like phone call or meeting or something that actually happens with someone within every department, like, annual, where it's like we set it up where they can come in and like be briefed about what they might be having to do. And we can find out then, like take a name down of who the point person is supposed to be, both who's appearing and who is processing who is the funnel, for these requests, so that we can properly reach out to them and say, this is what you might have to deal with. So that's the other thing that's the only other thing that like I thought in terms of recommendation.
Yeah, so I can just kind of add to that. I mean, I think your interpretation of what he's referring to is probably correct.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I did the first report, a bunch of people from different departments reached out to me and said, hey, we want to give you our input, right? And then I learned that they'd even like created a kind of group that would meet regularly to discuss like how do we present things in front of the task force and what are they really looking for, because they didn't feel like the training that they get through the city really covered the experience of coming before the task force and what we were expecting and what they were supposed to present us. I think we've done some things since I've been on this task force, like member neighbors, you know, thing that gets sent out to everybody, you know, giving them specific questions that we want answered and things like that. But there's clearly still an interest, I think, on the part of a lot of the more, especially conscientious departments, or the ones who just don't want to be, you know, pulled up in front of us anymore, to try to understand better what it is that we're looking for. And I think, yeah, maybe there needs to be some way to do it that's not just creating more documentation.
Yeah, exactly.
About like trying to come up with best practices, but maybe it's better as like a
training
presentation, training like from the task force or something that doesn't necessarily, I don't know, or some kind of voluntary thing where, you know, if you want to have outreach and, you know.
Well, that's a funny thing, because as you said it, like honestly, I went the opposite way, like where the email like just we're gonna create the list, that's cool. Whereas like this issue, I'm like, what about mandatory training? Like, you know,
already
for Sunshine.
Yeah.
Is it okay? And so a question with that, is that mandatory training one of the videos?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
It's like,
I don't have any words for that. Like I don't think I need to like
really deal with like what happens when you come before the task force. You know what I mean? It doesn't deal with some of the issues that commonly snare people, like the immediate disclosure requests. Just looked at over and over again, right? Like, how do you handle this? What do you do if there's only one person receiving the request and they go on vacation?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people don't think about it because it's just not like their main job on their plate. You know what I mean? So I think that is like a very valid thing to be thinking about. And I just wanted to, I mean, not to change the topic, but I do want to say, like, when I was going over the ordinance again for the annual report, trying to think about the conclusions, I came across this part of our mandate, which says that we're supposed to be formulating explicit goals around the law's practical and timely implementation. Like, and I don't think we've formulated any goals since I've been here, right? And just having like, here are our goals for the next 2 years. We want to work on this and this, I think would be a helpful kind of focusing exercise. But
I guess I would, having only been here for so long, I would almost disagree, because the goal when I got here was clearing the backlog, which we did. So
it wasn't even an explicit
yeah,
goal.
exactly. So
it was just that we kind of made it a goal and hyped up about it in every meeting.
Yeah.
And so it seems like a goal. But, you know, I don't know if we actually had a discussion about like, okay, we want to pick 3 goals that we're really going to work on. And one is, you know, better communication with departments so that we get more compliance.
Well,
that might be a valid goal.
Well, I would say that whatever the goal is, it should be more explicit.
Right.
Like, yeah, but generally beyond that, as an idea that you put forward, if we were voting, I would second the idea, in the sense that, like, I would say, yeah, absolutely, you should have something written down. Like, you've decided what it is, and to put it down and say, this is what we're going to be like focusing on for the year. And then literally in your annual report, you just do a review of it. You're like, well, this was a goal. Guess what we didn't do?
Yeah. Right.
And,
would be another piece.
like, but yeah.
Yeah. So
I think that's a good idea.
Yes, I have that in the conclusion of this year's report, that we, now that we've sort of cleared our backlog, we should be looking at what are our explicit goals that are going to add to, you know, practical and timely implementation. And I suggested goals, but I just suggest them because they were things that came up during the year. Things like developing a process for identifying complaints that petitioners don't really plan to pursue, and then not scheduling them right prior to scheduling. So we've talked about that this year. We've talked about guidelines for the city around immediate disclosure requests, maybe if we did a training or if we did some kind of outreach, or if we did some kind of calls with more, problem departments, and we said, here are the things you keep coming up for, and here's some solutions we want to suggest to you, or whatever it is. That's another one.
Yeah, that's a good idea too, where it's like, because you have your annual report, but you literally could also, by department, kind of, I don't know how much data parsing it would take, but you could by department look at like the types of requests that are very common for them and which ones they're not resolving, and just literally send them an email, like maybe with the annual report, where just send them an email like, by the way, this is the common problem. We're going to be holding a training next month, and like we think that this might help you resolve this, or can we resolve this? Can we help you resolve this?
Yeah, so to say right now, we don't really have a way of knowing what their most common requests are. We can see what their most common complaints against them are, but we can't really see like overall, did they mainly get this kind of request or that kind of request? But
yeah, but the complaints are the important part for us anyway. I mean, it's like, because it's not what they're getting requested, it's what they're not resolving necessarily. So
yeah, and then and I suggest a few other things in there too, but it was just based on things that we had discussed during the year. They're not like hierarchized or prioritized, or even what we would necessarily choose as goals if we sat down and talked about it.
That's a good catch, because that I don't even know where that exists, the goals provision, but that's okay. And it's a good catch, because that's like just not happening.
Yeah.
And that could mean a lot of different things. What's a goal? I mean, that can be very specific goals. It can be laudatory goals, or, highfalutin version of goals. But we could formulate something and just put it out there, and then we could figure out if we met the goal.
It's under 67.30C on task force policy related duties.
yeah.
30C. Oh.
Just saying, there's like, it lays out our policy related duties, and that is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, the simplest for that one is, I mean, we can discuss them now, but like really, like I think that should probably regularly come with the annual report, where it's like we've identified all the stuff we probably had. We should, at that time, around that time, there should be some sort of meeting, whether it's at the committee or the board level, to discuss the report and what we interpret as the goals that we might want to have, and to state them in the report. And then as you kind of like cycle through the year, then you have within the next report, you have, well, these were our last year's goals. This is what happened with them. These are what we're going to do now. And sometimes they just cycle back into the same goals. And it's just like, I don't know, it's hitting me a lot right now, because it's literally my day job right now. We're doing a lot of like look ahead team meeting stuff with goals, and we have a document that we update every week. So every year sounds a lot more manageable, and
maybe we need to have an off-site retreat for just to think outside the box.
Yeah.
I like it too, because it just puts everyone on the same page of what we're going to be working on, and different, and you could think about, okay, what could the different committees do to further those goals?
They could submit their own goals for the same thing. Like you can have like, well, this is what we want to do, but then they also could be like, it could all be in that report too.
Yeah. And then another one for me would be, as I kind of mentioned earlier, is just this issue. And I think it's a very tricky issue. I tried to be a little bit nuanced in how I talked about it in the report, but this goal of compliance with our orders. And, I don't think we're ever going to get perfect compliance, because we don't really have the tools to get perfect compliance. But I don't think that means that what we do is not, doesn't have like an important watchdog function, and an important like educational function, and an important kind of soft policy almost function of saying like, here's what should be happening. But right now, because we're not really following up with whether our orders have been complied with, we don't even know, like at a basic level, like how successful are we in this realm? and I feel like if there was some follow-up, that might also create a little bit more pressure. And I just think we are in this very delicate position because of the powers that we do and don't have. And a lot of it has to do with, how hard are we looking at things? Are we paying attention? That's part of creating that kind of leverage and impetus to have our orders complied with. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Very good. Very good. Let me I'm just going to point to two provisions which kind of may relate to some of the ideas that you're talking about. Right before the developing goals is another provision that I don't know if we do anything in doing that, to provide information to other city departments on appropriate ways in which to implement. I don't think there's anything that goes out from the task force to departments. And I'll also point out that 67.33 has a weird provision. Annual training shall be provided by the city attorney's office with the assistance of the task force. They should have written that better, but there is a function that we're just not fulfilling that is written into this thing, which is we're supposed to be telling them things like, you can do this, you can't do that, you can do this. I know that they get the good government guide from the city attorney's office, and they have access to the city attorney's office, and they get training by the city attorney without us assisting the city attorney. I don't even know what that would look like. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the subject is dealt with by what the city attorney's office does. Partly because the city attorney's office has its own people, and it has a walled off section, which is our lawyers. And I know that I haven't yet seen any daylight between what we would hear from the regular city attorneys and from our city attorneys. And that's something I'm kind of myself watching for. But there's a reason why there's two sets of lawyers, is because they can have different opinions. And so it's not like the regular city attorney's office is sending down the word from God that this is the only interpretation of law. That's not how it works. And I think that the task force can have a position on things, and to tell departments, what they can and can't do. And it may be that that's not the position that the city attorney's office takes. I think that's probably, it may be that, as soon as I say that, the supervisors stop reappointing me. And so I go off and do something else.
I would just say that when I joined, I didn't know there were committees to begin with, or that I would be assigned to one. And when I found that out, of course, I screamed. I'm kidding. When I found that out, I assumed that's what the committees were doing, was talking to city departments about.
Yeah.
I kind of thought that maybe that was a bit more of the work generally, was doing that, as opposed to just like complaint evaluation.
Yeah. Agreed.
But I do think there's been a couple times since I've been on this task force that we have sent out general memos about particular issues that have gone out to city departments and whoever else. But it is like a lot of words. It's just like, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah. Yes.
But, it's just like a page on this or a page on that. I think it's happened a couple times.
Just, I thought, okay, so this is like, and I'm saying this as like not just like, oh wow, my conceptions are totally blown. I'm saying I would recommend this. Like I don't necessarily think that it seems to me that like we become a thorn in someone's side, not only because they're not sure what's going on, but because it's not really documentation they're prone to want to open if they don't necessarily have to. So to me, like my perception was that there was a committee whose role it was, the way that ours is to hear complaints. There's a committee where their callers or their attendants were people who were needing to have conversations with in these departments. Like that was literally what they were doing, was talking to these departments, both, at first I thought it was literally just about like, informing them, but then, having been here a decent while now, I assume that's what was happening when we sent something to compliance, that like a phone call was happening. I mean, I haven't sat in on those meetings, but I really thought that they were having like people up here and talk about, the update on their case, like the departments, and so, and I'm sorry. I'm definitely going to sound ignorant. I know this came up earlier, I think before the meeting, but is that not happening?
I know Patricia's probably the main contact that we have with the outside world. And
so compliance doesn't have
these things. I don't think they have any kind of like relationship with talking to outreach, education. And that's to me, that's on them, but it's also on us, because we create the committee and the committee doesn't do anything that we don't allow it to do. But I think that, I guess my view on this is that we should be setting goals as a task force that would be implemented. And if we say that they need to be implemented in that committee, then it would put a more specific onus on them. And maybe all the people who are on the committee quit. I don't know. But it seems to me that, maybe they've gone and they've either tried it and it didn't work, or they need ideas from us, possibly.
I mean, I think that we've had a lot of productive ideas already, so I wouldn't want to bloat it by adding.
No.
But that would be the other suggestion, the one that I was just suggesting. Like, I think that there should be more direct conversations, and I think that they can happen at the committee, at the meeting level, like when meetings happen, that there could be conversations with department level, like not even just like, again, if training or education is not like something that someone is prone to send someone even on a phone call to do, then certainly during a compliance phone call that I think should be happening more often, personally.
Okay. Yeah, I think we've kind of covered a lot of ground, and there's to me, there's sort of like some, as one of our favorite people says, let's see, it's a concept of a plan. We have some concepts of
Oh yes, one of our favorite people.
like the the new healthcare plan. I'm sorry to use
No,
that.
it's no.
Horrible.
I immediately got that. Yes.
I'll just throw in that, when I first was on the task force and I was trying to figure out how to improve the whole packet situation, I was told, oh, if you want to do something, you need to discuss it first in your committee. I don't, and then this was kind of disavowed later, so I don't know if this really is the only way to do things, but I actually do, in retrospect, think it's a good way to do things, because then at least you get the input of a couple other people before you take the ideas to the full task force for them to discuss it.
Yeah.
So I think there is merit, even though we're complaints. It's not complaints trying to come and tell everyone else what to do. It's just on complaints. Now that we're seeing fewer complaints, we realize that, there's time now to really begin to look at how can we more seriously address our other duties in the Sunshine Ordinance. And here's some ideas we have, and we want to bring it to the full task force to, see what people make of it and whether there's, an appetite for setting some goals and doing some specific things around these other kinds of like policy related duties.
Yeah. I think what we probably could do is put together something that's, not voluminous, but we sort of parse out from what we just talked about a handful of things that we think just are not happening and they should happen. And we try to figure out a phrasing for it. I don't know how we present it. We want to be, not verbose. And then we would just sort of like bring it up and say, kind of like talk about at a full meeting. We think, we met, we talked, we refined it, and we think that these are things that are within our ambit, and we think we should do them or try to figure out. And the goals?
And potential action items
Yeah.
on those goals.
Goals, action item.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Just like that. Yeah. And so we can sort of like put pen to paper together and get something that we can, probably put in a meeting. We'll put it into a meeting and then talk about, why we want to do it and the value, the value, and including, RSS feeds and the mailing list that actually doesn't exist, and as specific things as we can get, the better. And if we can, like, if it's a one-off where you create it, it happens automatically and it's not continued labor, so that we're not just simply trying to tell other people that you should do this, you should do that. Well, that is of value here.
I think that like bringing it to a larger group is good, but I also think that much like the consent calendar and 6721 cases, et cetera, where it essentially became agendized and then discussed, I think that there's potentially not all of these, but whatever seems to be the most like that we're really excited about potentially trying. And not even, I would say that like not even ones that are going to probably get some pushback and need a lot of, like, I think that what I said about compliance, for example, would take a lot of like discussion for how that might be implemented or discussed. I don't think that, for example, we should be getting too much. I mean, I think that it will become a discussion because it's the full board and that happens, but something like a mailing list, you could do this meeting, you could bring everything to the, like discuss like a brainstorm, but also in lieu of anything happening, you could just agendize, we would like to create a mailing list and have that discussion specifically, right? I would think. So.
Good. Any
that's all. Yeah.
Any thoughts from our guru, Ms. Peterson?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm happy to support your ideas.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Well, I think that was a very good talk that I think it's good that we're all here today and we got to do that, because I know that we're all participating on this. And I think we're kind of we've kind of expanded the scope, and now we're going to start to narrow it into more goals and ideas for implementation. And so that's where we are. And so maybe we'll continue the next time we have all three. Okay. Public comment.
We have no one in the room and no one in the queue.
Okay. All right, next item.
Item 7, Announcements, comments, questions, and future agenda items by members of the Complaint Committee.
Hmm. Nah, nothing. I don't have anything.
I don't know.
No.
All right.
No action taken. No one available for public comment.
Next item.
Item 8, adjournment.
We'll do adjourn.
Right.
We're adjourned at 7:30 PM. Microphones are off.